I'm on stage at the 7th Annual Corporate Leadership Gala. Bright lights in my eyes. 200 people staring. They'd just called my name for the Employee of the Decade award. As I'm walking up, my wife's colleague, Stephanie, takes the microphone for an impromptu toast. "We all love Adam," she says, her voice a little too loud. But everyone knows the real secret to Jessica's success. Having a backup partner right here. She gestures to the front table. To Brandon, my wife's ex. The room titters. A few nervous laughs. I look at my wife. Jessica. She isn't just smiling. She laughs. A genuine, amused laugh. I didn't flinch. I didn't get angry. I felt nothing. Or maybe not nothing. I felt clear. It was like I'd been driving in a fog for years. And that one, single, genuine laugh was a gust of wind that just cleared the windshield. For a second, everything stopped. The sounds of the ballroom, the clinking glasses, the polite chatter, the awful smooth jazz, it all just faded into a dull roar. I was aware of the heavy crystal award in my hands. Employee of the Decade. 10 years of my life. 10 years of building their logistics from a single warehouse to a nationwide network. I smile. A calm, polite smile. The same one I'd used in 1,000 budget meetings. I walked to the microphone. The room quieted down, expecting a speech. "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady. "I'd like to thank the company for this honor. It's been an education." Jessica, at the front table, beamed at me. She was relaxed. She thought I was playing along, being the good sport, the reliable husband, the safe option. I finished at the microphone and started walking off the stage. I walked past the stairs that led back to my table. I walked past Jessica. Her smile faltered. Just a little. In confusion, I walked straight to the front table, right to where Brandon was sitting. He still had that smirk. That confident I'm the star look. I stopped right in front of him. The whole room was watching. I held out the Employee of the Decade award. It was heavy. Solid crystal. Tag in. "Partner," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence. Brandon's smirk vanished. He looked at me, confused. "You're the real partner now," I said, and I didn't hand it to him. I dropped it. I let go. He fumbled. Shocked. Catching the heavy award before it could hit the table. Spilling his champagne. While he was juggling it, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my wedding ring, a simple, heavy, gold band. I didn't throw it. I didn't make a scene. I just placed it, very gently, on top of the crystal award he was now holding. The sound of the metal hitting the crystal was a tiny clink that seemed to echo in the dead, silent ballroom. Brandon stared at the ring like it was a live grenade. Then I turned to my wife, Jessica. Her face was white. Her mouth was open. "The CEO's daughter, I resign." I said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "I'm done." I turned around, and I walked. I didn't run. I walked. Straight past the 200 silent guests, past the Employee of the Decade banner, and out the main doors of the ballroom. Behind me, there was no applause. No one spoke. Just a deafening. Perfect silence. I drove. I didn't go home. Home was a word that had just dissolved. The house. The shared accounts. The life I'd been building, it all felt like a movie set I'd just walked off of. I wasn't angry. That was the strangest part. I'd expected rage. Or humiliation. Or this white-hot fire. But there was just silence. A cold. Perfect. Clinical clarity. I was driving on the highway. My hands steady on the wheel of my truck. Still in my tuxedo. The crisp white shirt and bow tie felt like a costume. I'd been playing a part for 10 years, and I'd only just realized it. I ended up at my brother Michael's workshop. It was the only place that made sense. Michael's world is the opposite of the one I just left. The gala was all soft lights, champagne, and glass. Michael's shop is steel, grease, and the smell of welding fluid. It's real. The shop was closed, but I knew he'd be in the back office, closing out his books. I used my key. He looked up from a stack of invoices when I walked in. He didn't say a word. He just took in the tux, the look on my face, and the fact that it was 10:30 on a Saturday night when I was supposed to be at a fancy party. He just nodded. Slowly. Beer, he said. It wasn't a question. He grabbed 2 bottles from the old fridge, twisted the cap off one, and handed it to me. He leaned back against a workbench, his arms crossed. So, you finally did it. Did what? Woke up, Michael said. He took a sip. You've been walking around half asleep for 10 years. Man, what was it? I told him. I told him about the award. The employee of the decade. The crystal paperweight for 10 years of my life. I told him about Stephanie's toast. The backup partner joke. Michael snorted. Classy. That's not the part that did it, I said. The toast was just noise. It was Jessica. She laughed. Man, a real laugh. Like it was the funniest, truest thing she'd heard all night. I stared at the beer in my hand, and in that second, it was like a balance sheet, finally adding up. It all made sense. He met Jessica right after Brandon. Her college sweetheart had broken her heart. He was the star, even back then flashy. Creative. Unpredictable. He'd left to find himself, and she was devastated. And there I was. Adam, the logistics guy. I wasn't a star. I was the engine. I was the guy who came in, put his head down, and built the entire back end of her father's company. When I started, they were shipping out of one warehouse. Badly, 10 years later, I was running a nationwide distribution network that I'd built from scratch. I'd made them. And by extension myself, very, very wealthy. They all loved me for it. Her father loved me because I was reliable. I was stable. I wasn't a threat. I didn't have a competing ego. I was the perfect son-in-law. And Jessica. I thought she loved me. But sitting there in Michael's shop, the smell of motor oil cutting through the last traces of Gala perfume, I realized the truth. I wasn't her partner. I was her utility. This is the psychology of the safe option. People don't choose the safe option because they love it. They choose it because it's predictable. It's the sensible investment. It's the portfolio that guarantees a steady return, so they can take bigger risks with their fun money. I was her fun money. I was the guy who paid the bills, managed the house, and ran the boring side of the business. I was the one who made sure the lights were always on, so she could play. And she was playing at being a marketing VP, playing at being a wife. I wasn't just a husband. I was a component in her family's machine. I was the perfect, non-threatening koch. I handled the unsexy, critical, complex logistics, the part of the business that actually made it work, so her father didn't have to worry about it. And so she and Brandon could be creative and build the brand. I was the safe option, personally. 2. I was the guy who would never cheat, the guy who would never leave, the guy who would never, ever challenge her or her family. I was the safety net, stretched tight. And tonight she'd brought the high wire act, Brandon, into the tent. And she'd laughed when her friend pointed out that if he fell, I'd still be there to catch her. That was the joke. That was my Employee of the Decade award. It was a pat on the head for the loyal dog who'd guarded the house so well. She's been seeing him, I said. It wasn't a question. Michael just looked at me. You know the answer to that. Yeah. I needed to see it. I realized I was still holding my phone. It had been buzzing in my pocket for the last 30 minutes. Affronti. Insistent vibration against my leg. I pulled it out. 22 missed calls. All from Jessica. And the texts were rolling in. I looked at the first one. Adam. Where are you? You are humiliating my father. I showed it to Michael. He read it and let out a single, harsh laugh. Not you humiliated me. Not I'm sorry. But you humiliated my father? Wow. The joke wasn't the problem. I said, the clarity in my head getting sharper. Harder. The problem was that she laughed. The problem is that she invited him. The problem is that somewhere along the way, I stopped being her husband and just became the guy who runs the warehouses. My phone buzzed again. A new text. From Jessica. You are overreacting. You've ruined everything over a joke. Call me now. Michael looked at the phone. Then at me. So, what's the plan? This isn't a breakdown. This is a demolition. And you're the one holding the hammer. Where do we start? I took a long drink of the beer. It tasted cold. And real. I need to go back to the house. I said, I need my laptop. My phone wouldn't stop. It was a constant, furious buzzing on the workbench next to me. I just stared at it. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Michael came back from the front, wiping his hands on a rag. He gestured to the phone. You gonna get that? No. It's her, he said. I know. As if on cue, the screen lit up again. A text from Stephanie, the one who made the toast. I read it out loud. You need to apologize to Jessica. You made a huge scene. Michael let out a low whistle. They're attacking. They're not apologizing. They're attacking. That tells you everything you need to know. He was right. They weren't shocked by what they'd done. They were shocked that I'd stopped playing along. They were angry that the safety net had just gotten up and walked away. My phone buzzed again. This time, I looked. The lock screen was a rolling feed of her fury. Adam, where are you? You are humiliating my father. Do you know what you've done? The board members were all there. You've ruined everything. It was a joke. You are overreacting. You've ruined our marriage over a stupid joke. I stared at that last one. Overreacting. Like I was the problem. Like I was the one who was out of line. And this is where the fog didn't just clear, it evaporated. I understood. In that moment, the psychology of it. This wasn't a mistake. This was arrogance. This is the arrogance of the double life. When you get away with a lie for long enough, you stop feeling guilty about it. You start feeling contempt for the person you're lying to. Contempt for how easy it is. Contempt for them being too stupid or too safe to ever catch you. Her laugh at that gala. It wasn't a slip. It was a symptom. It was the hubris of someone who had been juggling two lives for so long she'd started to believe she was entitled to both. She wasn't just managing an emotional affair. She was enjoying the risk. She wasn't apologizing because, in her mind, she'd done nothing wrong. The only crime was my reaction. The safe option had suddenly and spectacularly malfunctioned. The loyal cog in the machine had just stripped its gears and brought the whole assembly line to a halt. And she was furious. She's not sorry, I said, my voice sounding flat, clinical. She's just mad she got caught. Caught isn't the word, Michael said. He was looking at my phone with a dark curiosity. She's mad you reacted at all. She expected you to just, eat it? Go home and argue. Where nobody could see. Yeah, I said. That's exactly what she expected. She expected the safe option to be safe. I shut the phone off. The sudden silence in the shop was a relief. I need my laptop, I said again. And my personal files? They're in the study. Michael nodded, grabbing his keys. You sure you're good to go back there? She's probably at the house. Pacing like a caged animal. She's not at the house, I said. How do you know? I pointed to the text I'd read earlier. You are humiliating my father. She's not at home. She's at her father's house. Doing damage control. Spinning the story. Right now. I'm not the betrayed husband. I'm the unhinged employee who had a public meltdown. Michael's jaw tightened. They're going to circle the wagons. You know that. Right, her family. They're going to protect her. Not you. I know. That's why I'm not fighting for my marriage. Mike, I'm just collecting my things. He looked at me. A serious, appraising look. No, You're not. You're going to war. Adam, you just don't realize it yet. But you walked out of that gala. You resigned in front of 200 of their peers. This isn't a separation. This is an extraction. You need to be smart about this. You've been the guy who built their whole system. You know everything. He paused, and the look on his face changed. It was the same look he got when he'd listened to a broken engine, pinpointing the one tiny, hidden flaw. Adam, he said, if she's this arrogant in public, if she's this sloppy, what's she been doing in private? With the company? With the money? That's when the last piece clicked. That fog. I had been so focused on the personal betrayal, the affair, the backup partner, but I'd been feeling it for months. The fog wasn't just in my marriage. It was at work. It was the marketing budgets, the ones that kept swelling, the consulting fees that didn't make sense, the invoices I'd see that were thin on details but fast-tracked for approval by Jessica, invoices from Brandon's consulting firm. Get in the truck, I said to Michael. She's at her father's. That gives us a window. The anger still wasn't hot. It was cold. It was precise. This wasn't about a broken heart anymore. This was about accounting. We were right. Jessica's car was gone. Her father's place was a 30-minute drive. The house was dark, silent, windows open. Michael said, nodding to the street. She's not here. Go. I walked into the house I'd paid the mortgage on for 7 years. It didn't feel like mine. It felt like a crime scene. And maybe I was the victim. Or maybe I was the detective. I wasn't sure. I went straight to the study. Michael stood in the doorway, a silent guard, while I grabbed my personal laptop, a backup drive, and a handful of my own files. Got what you need, he asked. Not yet. I sat down at the desk, my main workstation. I logged into the company's back-end procurement system. I'd built this system. I'd designed the architecture, written the protocols, and built in all the back-end reporting tools. I had full admin access. Not as an employee, but as its creator. My hands didn't shake. I felt calm, focused. This wasn't revenge. This was an audit. I pulled up the vendor list. Brandon's consulting firm, Be Creative Solutions. A shell company with a P.O. box address. I'd already looked up on my phone. It was a mailbox rental store in a strip mall. I opened the account. Invoices. Dozens of them. Stretching back 18 months. I clicked on the first one. $5,300. The line item just said, Synergy-based brand activation. Michael, I said, my voice quiet. You need to see this. He stepped in, leaning over my shoulder. What's synergy-based brand activation? He asked. It's nothing. I said, it's what you write when you don't want anyone to know what you're billing for. I clicked on the next one. $6,700. Line item phase 2 ideation. The next, $14,000. Strategic market relaunch. That's a lot of money for words. Michael said, it's not the words. I said, my mouse clicking, my mind racing. I was sorting, filtering, cross-referencing. The total was staggering. Over $100,000 in the last year alone. It's the approvals. I pulled up the metadata on the $14,000 invoice. Approved by J. Harrison. Jessica. Approved date. 3 days ago. So she's paying her boyfriend from the company account, Michael said, his voice hard. Her father's going to love that. No. I said, he won't, but that's not the part he's going to love least. I kept digging. The system I built, it tracks everything. Every digital footprint. The invoices were submitted by Brandon. They were approved by Jessica. But where was the money coming from? Which budget? I ran the trace. And that's when I found it. My blood didn't run cold. It didn't do anything. It just pumped. Steady. The budget code. It was mine. The payments weren't being drawn from the marketing budget. Jessica was smarter than that. Her father scrutinizes marketing. No, they were being drawn from my budget. The logistics budget, a $3.5 million a year monster that I managed. And the line item? She'd hidden it, buried it. She'd been routing the payments and coding them as shipping overages and fuel surcharges. Me budget. My numbers. For months, I'd been chasing a ghost. I'd been trying to figure out why my fuel costs were running 6% over projection. I'd had meetings with my freight carriers. I'd spent weeks trying to find the leak. I'd been looking for a faulty accounting practice. I should have been looking for a criminal. She'd been using me, using my reputation, using the trust her father had in me. I was the safe option, the reliable one. No one would ever audit my department. My numbers were always clean. I was the one who found the leaks, who saved them money. And she'd used that. She'd used my own competence as a shield to defraud her own family's company. This wasn't just an emotional affair. This wasn't just disrespect. This was wire fraud. This was a conspiracy. I looked at Michael. He was just staring at the screen, his face pale. She was setting you up. Man, if this ever came out, it's your budget, your numbers. It looks like you. Yeah, I said. I plugged in my backup drive. I didn't just look. I downloaded every invoice, every approval log, every IP address stamp for the submissions and the approvals, every budget transfer. I took a complete copy of the last 2 years of their digital love letters, written in company ink and paid for with my reputation. Adam, Michael said, this is a kill shot. I know, I said. I ejected the drive and put it in my pocket. It felt heavier than any Crystal Award. I logged out, cleared the cache. I stood up from the desk and looked around the study. The books, the photos, the life I'd thought I had, it was all a lie. But the anger wasn't hot. It was clinical. Let's go, I said. I'm done. We were right. Jessica's car was gone. Her father's place was a 30-minute drive. The house was dark, silent, windows open. Michael said, nodding to the street. She's not here. Go. I walked into the house. I'd paid the mortgage on for 7 years. It didn't feel like mine. It felt like a crime scene. And maybe I was the victim. Or maybe I was the detective. I wasn't sure. I went straight to the study. Michael stood in the doorway, a silent guard, while I grabbed my personal laptop, a backup drive, and a handful of my own files. Got what you need, he asked. Not yet. I sat down at the desk. My main workstation. I logged into the company's back-end procurement system. I'd built this system. I'd designed the architecture, written the protocols, and built in all the back-end reporting tools. I had full admin access. Not as an employee, but as its creator, my hands didn't shake. I felt calm, focused. This wasn't revenge. This was an audit. I pulled up the vendor list. Brandon's consulting firm, B Creative Solutions. A shell company with a P. O. Box address. I'd already looked up on my phone. It was a mailbox rental store in a strip mall. I opened the account. En voici. Dozens of them, stretching back 18 months. I clicked on the first one, $5,300. The line item just said, synergy-based brand activation. Michael, I said, my voice quiet. You need to see this. He stepped in, leaning over my shoulder. What's synergy-based brand activation? He asked. It's nothing, I said. It's what you write when you don't want anyone to know what you're billing for. I clicked on the next one, $6,700. Line item, Phase 2 ideation. The next, $14,000. Strategic market relaunch. That's a lot of money for words, Michael said. It's not the words, I said, my mouse clicking, my mind racing. I was sorting, filtering, cross-referencing. The total was staggering. Over $100,000 in the last year alone. It's the approvals. I pulled up the metadata on the $14,000 invoice. Approved by J. Harrison. Jessica. Approved date. 3 days ago. So she's paying her boyfriend from the company account, Michael said, his voice hard. Her father's going to love that. No, I said. He won't. But that's not the part he's going to love least. I kept digging. The system I built. It tracks everything. Every digital footprint. The invoices were submitted by Brandon. They were approved by Jessica. But where was the money coming from? Which budget? I ran the trace. And that's when I found it. My blood didn't run cold. It didn't do anything. It just pumped. Steady. The budget code. It was mine. The payments weren't being drawn from the marketing budget. Jessica was smarter than that. Her father scrutinizes marketing. No, they were being drawn from my budget. The logistics budget, a $3.5 million a year monster that I managed, and the line item. She'd hidden it, buried it. She'd been routing the payments and coding them as shipping overages and fuel surcharges. My budget. My numbers. For months. I'd been chasing a ghost. I'd been trying to figure out why my fuel costs were running 6% over projection. I'd had meetings with my freight carriers. I'd spent weeks trying to find the leak. I'd been looking for a faulty accounting practice. I should have been looking for a criminal. She'd been using me. Using my reputation. Using the trust her father had in me. I was the safe option. The reliable one. No one would ever audit my department. My numbers were always clean. I was the one who found the leaks. Who saved them money. And she'd used that. She'd used my own competence as a shield to defraud her own family's company. This wasn't just an emotional affair. This wasn't just disrespect. This was wire fraud. This was a conspiracy. I looked at Michael. He was just staring at the screen. His face pale. She was setting you up. Man, if this ever came out, it's your budget. Your numbers. It looks like you. Yeah, I said. I plugged in my backup drive. I didn't just look. I downloaded. Every invoice. Every approval log. Every IP address stamp for the submissions and the approvals. Every budget transfer. I took a complete copy of the last 2 years of their digital love letters, written in company ink and paid for with my reputation. Adam, Michael said. This is a kill shot. I know, I said. I ejected the drive and put it in my pocket. It felt heavier than any Crystal Award. I logged out, cleared the cache. I stood up from the desk and looked around the study. The books, the photos, the life I'd thought I had, it was all a lie. But the anger wasn't hot. It was clinical. Let's go, I said. I'm done. She finally called me. Not with a text, but a real call. I'd been at Michael's for 3 days. 3 days of silence. 3 days of me and him sitting in his office, mapping out the architecture of her fraud on a whiteboard. Her voice on the phone was different. It wasn't the furious, arrogant tone from the texts. This was a new voice. Small. Broken. Wet with tears. Adam, she whispered. Please, we need to talk. Not like this. Just face to face. Please. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Fine, I said. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. The cafe on Mercer Street. Public place. I hung up before she could say I love you, which I knew was coming. The cafe was one of those sterile, high-end places with bad coffee and uncomfortable chairs. Neutral territory. I got there 10 minutes early. I didn't order anything. I just sat at a small table in the back. Facing the door, she walked in at 10:02. The gala was gone. The polished, powerful VP. The CEO's daughter. She was gone. The woman who walked in looked awful. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her hair was scraped back into a messy bun. And she was wearing an old sweatshirt and yoga pants. She looked small. She slid into the chair across from me, her hands twisting in her lap. Thank you for coming, she whispered. I just waited. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. Adam, I... She started, and the tears just came, full-on crying, right there in the cafe. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. It was stupid. It was a stupid, awful, drunk joke. She reached across the table, but I didn't move. I just kept my hands in my lap. She pulled hers back. It meant nothing. She pleaded, Stephanie is an idiot. I was drunk, and I never meant for you to be. Humiliated. I was humiliated. Too. I almost laughed. It was clinical. This feeling, this complete detachment, I was watching a performance. Nothing happened with Brandon, she said, her voice getting desperate. I swear, we're just friends. It was old times. It was a mistake, but nothing happened. I didn't sleep with him. I never kissed him. It was just talk. She was trying to have the wrong conversation. She was here to negotiate the terms of our marriage, to apologize for the affair. She thought that was what this was about. She thought this was a fight about her heart. My father, he's upset, she said, trying a new tactic. He's livid, at both of us, but he'll forgive you. He'll forgive us. He told me, he said if you just come back, we can put this behind us. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. Adam, 7 years. You can't throw away 7 years over one night. She was crying so hard she was barely making sense, and I just sat there. I let her wind down. I let all the excuses, all the tears, all the I'm sorries and he'll forgive yous fill the space between us. When she was finally done, just looking at me with those red, hopeful, terrified eyes, I reached into the breast pocket of my jacket. I didn't pull out the drive. I pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. I put it on the table. I didn't push it. I just placed it. She looked at it, confused. What? What is that? I unfolded it. It was a printout on an invoice. It's invoice 304. I said. My voice was calm. It was the same voice I used in budget meetings. From B Creative Solutions. For strategic market relaunch. For $14,000. Jessica's face. It didn't just go white. It went blank. The blood drained so fast, she looked transparent. All the tears. All the emotion. Just evaporated. This was a new kind of silence. That's one. I said, there are 12, totaling $108,000. In the last year, her breathing stopped. I leaned forward, just slightly. You didn't just disrespect our marriage. Jessica, you disrespected my intelligence. You've been funneling money from my logistics budget, disguising it as fuel surcharges to pay your backup partner. She opened her mouth. No sound came out. This isn't about your heart, I said, my voice cold. Factual. It's about the law. You didn't just cheat. You committed wire fraud. And you used my department, my reputation, as a shield to do it. She was frozen. This was the real her, the calculating, arrogant woman from the gala, trapped inside the weeping one. I stood up. So, no, we're not going to counseling. And I don't care if your father forgives me. This isn't a family drama you can spin. I left the invoice on the table. I'm done. Don't contact me again unless it's through a lawyer. Or, more likely, an auditor. I walked out of the cafe, and I didn't look back. I was free. I didn't hear from Jessica again, but I heard about her. Michael told me. About 6 weeks later, the drive I'd copied, I'd given it to my lawyer, who had then presented it to her father's lawyer as part of my resignation. A full-blown, independent audit was launched, the kind with federal implications. I heard Brandon disappeared almost immediately. The star consultant, the real partner he'd evaporated, took the money he'd siphoned and was last seen. According to rumors, somewhere in Southeast Asia, he'd left Jessica to take the entire fall alone. I heard her father's company was forced to restate its earnings for the last 2 years. I heard the SEC was investigating. I heard Jessica was facing charges. I heard all this. And I felt nothing. It was just accounting. The numbers finally balancing. I didn't go back to a big corporation. I couldn't. Instead, I took the one thing I'd ever truly owned, my knowledge, and I went independent. I became a logistics consultant. The guy other companies hired to find the leaks, to fix the systems. And I was good at it. I was very, very good at it. About 6 months after that night, I was at a new client's warehouse, a big medical supply company. I was walking the floor, analyzing their pick and pack process, when the vendor manager walked up to me. Her name was Sarah. She was in her 30s, professional, with a sharp, intelligent way of looking at things. She just had a clipboard, up in, and a question about shipping manifests. "You're Adam, right?" she asked. "I'm Sarah. I've been looking at your new routing plan. It's impressive. But I have a question about Zone 4. We talked about manifests, about fuel costs, about warehouse efficiency. It was simple. It was professional. It was easy. There were no hidden agendas. No double meanings. No backup plans. It was just work. Honest work. Later that week, she asked me if I wanted to grab coffee after we wrapped. I said yes. We sat in a small cafe, and we just talked. She told me about her life. I told her about mine. The new one. Anyway, the one I was building, and sitting there, listening to her laugh, a simple, genuine laugh, I had a final thought. There's a lot of talk about the courage it takes to cut off toxic family, but we don't talk about what family means. For 10 years, that company was my family. That prestige, that title, that Employee of the Decade award, that was my identity. I wasn't just losing a wife that night at the gala. I was losing my place in the world. I was losing the prestige of being part of her father's machine. That's the hardest part. It's not letting go of the people who hurt you. It's letting go of the identity they gave you. I realized that Employee of the Decade award, that crystal paperweight, it wasn't an honor. It was a cage. It was the price I paid for being the safe option. True value isn't an award someone gives you, something you have to polish and put on a shelf. It's the dignity you keep for yourself. The part of you that knows when to say, "I'm done." The part of you that can walk out of a burning building with nothing but the clothes on your back and just keep walking. The gala wasn't an ending. It wasn't the worst night of my life. It was my liberation. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.